Hello there. This is the story of Mark Defriest, a man who is also called the Prison Houdini, who escaped prison 7 times. I'm going to tell you about just a little bit brief synopsis of his story and where he is today. Did he or will he ever get out? So this guy, when he was very young, 19 years old, his dad died. And his dad willed him some tools. He was a mechanic, and he was married, and he was very good at fixing things. So he goes to his dad's house, and he gets his tools. And, of course, there was a probate, and so he basically violated probate, but allegedly he didn't know anything about probate. He just knew that those were his tools, because he knew his dad wanted him to have them. So his stepmother called the law on him, and they arrested him. Now, granted, that's how the documentary tells it. But that was not the only thing he was charged with. He was also charged with, now keep in mind, I'm going to tell the story fairly, okay? I do have compassion for this man, but I just think that the documentary was a little bit not really balanced as far as truthfulness. He was charged with felonious possession of a firearm. It didn't go into how it was felonious. Was he convicted of a felony in the past? Does he have a felony record already? But it wasn't just the theft. They kind of made it like, oh, he was just, that's what led to his arrest. But it was also the felonious possession of a firearm while he was allegedly stealing something he was supposed to have. It was messed up because his dad just died, Nonetheless, when he goes in, he's a distressed person. He does have some mental conditions, and he never really was given a fair treatment, in my personal opinion, as far as how you should treat somebody when you're taking a very serious plea bargain that could cause you to be in prison for life. I'll get into that in a minute. When there's as amount of doctors who have said that he was mentally incompetent, the state psychologist said that he was competent, and interestingly, years later, after he got a lot of attention in the media, becoming infamous because of his escapes, he's very intelligent. That's what happened. This doctor who said that he was competent, I think he got a conscience, because then he starts advocating for this guy and working with the lawyers to try to help release him. But the damage was already done. He had 6 doctors who said he was incompetent. So that plea bargain to give him life should have never should have never stood, and it should be like literally expunged, right? But this is the system in America. It doesn't have much compassion for mental illness. Now, granted, the problem with his behavior, is that with the judge, or the people who are reviewing whether or not, his release date of like 2085 should be reduced, takes note of the fact that after so many years, oh my gosh, he's been in prison, oh my gosh, by this time, decades, and he kept getting infractions in prison, 209 of them, and he escaped 7 times. And he never hurt anybody in his process of escaping, but the violence that they did to this man, and the abuse of the isolation, the things that they deprived him of, the behavior and the treatment that they did to him was criminal. They should be in prison for the things that they've done to him. So it's kind of hypocritical to judge this man for his infractions in prison after the many, many accounts, allegedly, of the amount of violence that they did to him while he's, restrained, beating him, and just the violence, the horrific violence that they did to him. Those people should be in prison also, in my opinion. But this is the system. They're extremely abusive, lack of compassion to mentally ill, and they just, when you have somebody who's been in prison for decades And then if the person ever does get out, it is shell shock to them. And for a lot of people who go in and they don't have mental illness, any kind of mental illness, even if you're competent, it does get exacerbated. And this is proven, it's absolutely proven that isolation for long periods of times, like they have done to him and millions in America, can actually worsen any condition and can even make them insane. And so a lot of his behaviors in prison were due to the symptoms the isolation has caused. There was a federal lawsuit that it was a California case that determined and ruled that isolation to a mentally ill person exacerbates their condition and is considered cruel and unusual punishment. And so they had to make changes to the prison system, but the problem is prisons across America continue to violate court rulings like that. So unless there's like federal laws passed on how they deal with the mentally ill and the type of things when you have a doctor, especially for the example, just because a state doctor said that he was competent, when you have 6 doctors who says that he was not competent, then they should not accept that plea bargain, right? They just need better laws. Because imagine if you're somebody who's poor or minorities and you don't succeed in getting the attention of the media. Because he did have extremely intelligent ability to craft things, that was just a part of his brain that he had a gift. But it doesn't mean he wasn't mentally ill because he had these talents. Because he became infamous with his escapes is why he got the attention into how horribly they treated this man and into his mental conditions and the remorse. Well, I don't know if it was remorse, but changing the position of the state doctor with new tools that came out in studying, as time progressed and tools came out and he showed in the documentary, this state doctor who said he was competent, it showed now they can actually better recognize things going on in the brain, that he did have brain injury and he did have mental conditions, but they didn't go backwards and undo his sentence. That's the problem. We need federal legislation for that. Nonetheless, he got married. I don't remember what happened with his ex-wife, but then he was married to a very, very sweet lady. She was older, and she just was such a warrior for him. And, so they were married, and so the fight went on and on and on. And here's what happened. In 2019, after he had just aged and just doing a lot better with a lot of support that helped his stress levels, with a lot of support, especially after the documentaries came out, amount of just nationwide love for him and just compassion and sympathy and not making excuses for his actions, but that really made a difference in him. And so he really said, okay, I'm not gonna, just keep acting out or whatever. And so he was able to do better. And on February 5th, 2019, he was released from prison. Sadly, 10 days later, he was rearrested. And they showed, his release, but he was immediately needing treatment, which he didn't get. There was no transition whatsoever. And allegedly, he was accused of doing drugs or some kind of parole violation. But usually, millions of people go through parole violations, but they usually get an evaluation, and it's the first time ever being on parole. And this man had never been in trouble with the law before. He went into prison and then basically created a life sentence for himself and the things that he did. It was a miracle he wasn't murdered, killed, and but the amount of abuse that he suffered, he should be a millionaire, really, honestly. But instead of trying to get him into treatment, instead of getting him the psychiatric treatment, the medical treatment, and whatever treatment that he needed, I mean, literally, he just got released. And he'd been in prison for over 30 years. They had no compassion for him. They wouldn't even give him a chance, because what happened was Florida decided to arrest him on charges for things he did while he was incarcerated, being abused by the system, and psychologically tortured with isolation for all of those years, which is against federal lawsuits, court rulings, that is cruel and unusual punishment and makes people insane when you have mental illness. And they charged him with things he did while he was in prison. They had never, ever, ever intended to let this man have an ounce of freedom. And then they ordered he must pay for his incarceration. Yes. For the psychological and physical abuse and the amount of horrible abuses that they did to him. We're talking beating him. We're talking criminal acts upon him. Okay? Yes, he committed crimes, but criminal acts upon him many times. They charged him $250,000. So he doesn't even get to have money on his books, because he has to work as a slave for the rest of his life. That's what they did to him. Now imagine what they're doing to other people who don't have the attention that he has because of his infamous prison escapes. Just imagine, just use your imagination, how many people are being beaten and criminal acts upon them, and the many millions in our system across America. Anyways, Prison Houdini, The Man Who Escaped Prison 7 Times, is a documentary. You can watch it. But there's no update on what happened to him. I will put his address in the description of this video if you're so inclined, feel like, well, you know. Anyways, I would like to see prison reform. I would like to see parole. I would like to see that there's transition programs for prisoners. I think that should be mandated. And I think that whenever somebody, such as a state doctor, has determined that he actually was mentally ill, I think that should be a mandated reversal of a sentence. Who determined that he was competent, and that's why they gave the sentence he had. When a state doctor has come back and said that he was wrong, it should have been reversed. Please, pray for this man, pray for our system, and pray for the oppressed in our nation. Have a blessed day.